For many, Aardman might be known as the cheeky British studio with lovable clay-made characters. But be warned, there's a dark side to this studio, with many of its villains being able to stand toe-to-toe with some of the most vile of animated foes.
Get your hands off me!
I'm Keefe Nossi with Wicked Binge, and this is Aardman Villains, evil to most evil. Now, we won't be touching on every Aardman film today, as some of them don't have actual villains. We're going to try and include as many bad guys as possible, including those that may have only been in a short or two. With that said, let's get started.
Turn it up to full power!
Kicking things off, our least evil Aardman antagonist is Agent Red, leader of the Ministry of Alien Detection, or M.A.D. Honestly, it makes sense that such a low-key and wholesome franchise like Shaun the Sheep would have such a low-key and not very evil villain. Having been obsessed with proving the existence of aliens since childhood, Red quickly goes to investigate the farm after hearing about its UFO. Once there, she ends up accidentally mistaking Blitzer as an alien before then taking the crashed UFO back to M.A.D.'s base. Although she does chase after Shaun and his new little alien friend when they escape back to the farm, even using a mecha to try and catch them, Agent Red does eventually back down when Lula's parents arrive on Earth, recognizing them as the aliens she saw as a child and welcoming them with open arms. Again, Red was never out here trying to hurt or kill any aliens, she only wanted to prove that they existed. In that sense, Agent Red could easily be forgiven for any inconveniences or worries she might have caused for Shaun and his friends. Following Agent Red is another pretty minor antagonist, that being the pirate captain's oldest rival, Black Bellamy. Now, given that he's, a pirate, we can assume he's done plenty of plundering and murdering in his time, but in terms of crimes we actually see him do on screen, Bellamy isn't exactly much of a threat. He's cocky, sure.
He's gonna be Pirate of the Year! Again.
And he's certainly not afraid to show it, like when he rides a whale filled with gold right into the pirate's bar to show off his booty. He's also a bit of a jerk, almost constantly making fun of the pirate captain for all of his failures, but this puts him more at the level of a high school bully than a dastardly villain. His worst so-called crime is when he exposes the fact that the pirate captain was pardoned by Queen Victoria, but the pirate captain kind of brought that on himself by arguably doing something even worse, selling out his beloved pet bird Polly to earn him that pardon. So yeah, as is, Bellamy is just barely an antagonist, with even henchmen being able to rank above him in terms of being evil. Speaking of which, next up we have Flushed Away's Spike and Whitey. Being part of Toad's rat gang, these two are mostly seen either chasing after or helping capture Roddy and Rita. Between the two of them, Spike is definitely the more unhinged one, being pretty obsessed with committing violence.
Danger is my middle name.
However, he isn't actually that successful at committing violence. If anything, he's usually the one getting hurt through various forms of slapstick. Whitey, meanwhile, is incredibly soft-spoken and patient.
I'm upset now.
Even after a life of being a lab rat, he's a pretty decent guy, being one of the few characters to care about Spike's well-being. Sure, he may act as more of the muscle and has to manhandle anyone who gets in the Toad's way, but he never sees it as anything other than just doing his job. Beyond the fact that these guys, like Bellamy, are more bad than outright evil or villainous, we should also note that unlike their amphibian boss, these guys don't have some grand master plan against rat society. As we said, they're simple henchmen and are just using the gig as a means to pay their bills, which means that after the Toad gets defeated, there's a chance that these two could just end up going straight. Well, okay, maybe Whitey will go straight. Spike might still want to be a criminal, but hey, we don't think he'll get very far without getting hurt again, so at least there's that. Following them is one of Aardman's most recent villains, Dr. Fry from Chicken Run's Dawn of the Nugget. Now, Dr. Fry is an interesting case, given that, depending on your perspective, he might not be seen as a villain at all. He's working with and married to Mrs. Tweety, which certainly doesn't earn him any good points, but while Tweety is still as heartless as ever, Dr. Fry's mad scientist tendencies take on more shades of gray than being 100% evil.
Well done, science!
On its own, forcing creatures to be happy and mindless is pretty awful, we can't deny that, but it could also be argued that granting the chickens in his and Tweety's factory farm a blissful death through his collars is actually a kindness. But then again, he is still forcing innocent creatures to their deaths, and again, the brainwashing isn't great, even if it is technically nicer than just keeping them afraid and dreading the inevitable like the Tweetys were at the original movie's prison-like farm. For these reasons, we'll acknowledge that Fry is certainly still a villain, but we just can't rank him any higher. Keeping with the sidekicks is the French ninja Le Frog, cousin to the Toad.
Bonjour.
Le Frog and his crew are the ones that the Toad calls in when things start getting dire. Although Le Frog isn't that sympathetic to his cousin's tragic past, he and his team of frogs are still pretty efficient in tracking down and briefly capturing Roddy and Rita. He may see the Toad's plans as extreme, to the point of calling him cuckoo, but he'll still help his cousin out, not caring that much about the innocent rats that are going to perish if their plans succeed, ultimately still siding with his own kind. He even states that the only real reason he helps Toad is because he is family. He also cares for his tadpole nephews and nieces, telling the Toad to just give give his kids a puppy after his plan falls through. He may still be a villain at the end of the day, but at the very least, LaFrog is able to be civil and gentlemanly, even sharing a dinner with his men before going out on their mission instead of forcing them to do it on empty stomachs. It's a small thing, but it's more than what the Toad does for his henchmen. Similarly, Mr. Tweety is a pretty normal guy, all things considered, especially when compared to his now ex-wife, but his cruelty towards the chickens and his care easily push him into villain territory. Some have argued that beyond his paranoia about those chickens being up to something,
It's all in your head. It's all in your head.
he's only so cruel to them because he's taking out all the frustrations he has regarding his marriage and how terribly he's treated by Mrs. Tweety on them. We aren't sure how much validity this fan theory has, but it certainly doesn't excuse his actions. He literally throws Ginger into solitary confinement multiple times for being a troublemaker before then singling her out when it's time to test out the pie machine. We also can't forget how he still tried to stop the chickens from making their grand escape by kicking down their plane's launch ramp. Really, the fact that he's able to fully acknowledge that they're thinking, feeling, organized creatures and still wants to stop them from escaping to a better life just shows that while he may not be as iconic as his ex-wife, Mr. Tweety has his own dark side that cannot be ignored. But while complex or morally gray villains can be interesting, sometimes you just need a simple bad guy or a penguin with a gun, whatever works. Next we have Feathers McGraw, Aardman's very first villain. Despite his humble and almost cute demeanor at first, McGraw is far from an innocent animal. He's a criminal in the making, a mastermind, and a bird of many faces who's able to be pretty manipulative when he wants to be. Once he's able to successfully rent a room at Wallace and Gromit's place, he quickly puts together a scheme to try and use Wallace's new techno trousers to help him steal a valuable diamond. Through this, we can see how selfish McGraw is, not really caring about Wallace's safety nor whether or not he'd be sent to jail in his stead. When Gromit tries to fight back against him, McGraw just threatens to shoot him, and the two get into a mini train chase when McGraw tries to escape. It may seem a bit silly to put a diamond-stealing penguin this high up on our list, but the fact is that McGraw is still an incredibly efficient antagonist, being both clever and crafty as well as malicious and even somewhat intimidating when he wants to be, not caring about the well-being of anyone who gets in his way, so long as he still gets the prize he wants. Really, it's no wonder so many people, including the crew at Aardman if all the cameos they give him are any indication, still remember this little guy. We've finally arrived at the first of what could be called Aardman's large-scale villains. Starting with Early Man's Lord Nuth. On the surface, Nuth is far from intimidating. He's a lazy, greedy emperor who simply cares about taking land and resources for himself and his kingdom, assuring that he can be the richest ruler around.
Hello.
I love you.
He doesn't care about the well-being of his people, forcing them to pay outrageous ticket prices in order to watch the Bronze City's soccer matches, and he certainly doesn't care about the cavemen that he's forcing out of their ancestral home.
You have no home.
When Doug challenges him and his city to a soccer match, it doesn't take long for Nuth to become underhanded. He first tries to undercut Doug's confidence, telling him that his ancestors were terrible at soccer and reminding him of the cruel fate that awaits his tribe in the mines if they lose the game. When Doug and his team decide to still play, Nuth quickly resorts to cheating, becoming the game's new referee and showing blatant favoritism to the Bronze City's team. While he may technically be powerful, being the emperor of an entire city and all, Nuth is still a cowardly and selfish weakling who has his own boss that he has to answer to. He is still an awful person who certainly counts as a villain, but there are easily other Aardman baddies who outclass him both in terms of intimidation and overall evilness. After all, taking hostages or prisoners is one thing. Being an actual attempted murderer as well as a pretty cruel hunter, on the other hand, that's another. As we see with Lord Victor Quatermain. Being the main rival to Wallace and Gromit's pest control business, Quatermain takes a more violent approach to pest control, preferring to use his gun and essentially seeing any humane means of capture as a waste of time. What's more, he goes out of his way to try and antagonize Wallace out of pure jealousy. Between his snobby pettiness towards a guy who really didn't do anything except charm his crush and just the overall attitude he has towards Lady Toddington, this guy easily earns both the envy and the lust medals. However, Quatermain takes his villainy to a whole new level by the time the film reaches its climax, where we see him try to kill Wallace while he's in his were-rabbit form. Yeah, he fully knows that the were-rabbit is actually Wallace, and he doesn't care. He doesn't even hesitate. If anything, he sees taking out the goofy inventor as killing two birds with one stone. He becomes a town's hero, and he gets rid of his rival once and for all.
You can say goodbye to your fluffy lover boy.
Some may only see him as the wacky Aardman version of Gaston, but this doesn't stop him from being his own unique brand of diabolical. But if you thought Quatermain was crazy, Paella Bakewell just takes her crimes to a whole other level, just out of sheer scale. Coming from the short A Matter of Loaf and Death, this former actress went from being a simple fan of bakery products who made the mistake of eating too much to a full-on serial killer who specifically targets bakers as revenge. Though she may come off as sweet, Paella is in actuality incredibly ruthless and cold-hearted, even towards people who never wronged her, all for the sake of feeling like she's getting some sort of vengeance against the bakery products that ended her career?
I hate flour. I hate bread.
While she's unable to get away with taking out the final victim of her baker's dozen plan thanks to being foiled by Gromit, we should note that Paella was still able to successfully murder 12 other bakers. That is just... okay, seriously, what is it with the Wallace and Gromit franchise and including murderers as its villains? The fact that this lady might just have the highest body count of any Aardman villain is kind of shocking, honestly. But if you really need to emphasize just how delusional this lady was, Paella was so determined to kill Wallace that once all other methods fell through, she was ready to finish the job by setting off a bomb inside his house.
Gromit, it's a bomb!
Showing just how little she cared about anyone but herself. All of this easily earns her a spot just outside of our top 3, and we'll even throw in the Gluttony Medal for good measure. For our Bronze Medal of Evil, we're giving it to Her Royal Majesty, Queen Victoria. If there was any Aardman character that truly earned the Wrath Medal, it would have to be Miss I Hate Pirates, without a doubt.
Did you say pirate?
Seeing pirates as outdated, Vicky wants nothing more than to wipe them out for good, whether that's through sending her navy after them or trying to kill them with her own 2 hands. It's implied that she's imprisoned and executed plenty of them, making the crew's fear of her all the more warranted. But what makes Victoria interesting is that her selfishness actually overshadows her hatred in that she's willing to work with the pirate captain to get what she truly wants, that being the rare dodo bird, Polly. Like some of the best villains out there, Victoria's not only a powerhouse, but is able to be clever and extremely manipulative towards characters like the pirate captain and Charles Darwin.
You could be famed across the 7 seas.
Acting charming for as long as she needs to before then backstabbing them. We also can't forget to mention the final twist with this character in that she's a member of an exclusive club of other royals and leaders who exclusively feast on rare and nearly extinct animals. So yeah, if being an awful, hostile, and manipulative queen just wasn't enough for you, we're sure her cruelty towards innocent animals would put her high on any person's evilness ranking. Earning the Silver Medal of Evil is our final fleshed away villain, the Toad. In any other film, Toad might have been your typical mob boss, and to be fair, he does come off as that in the first half of the film. He tries to come off as classy and sophisticated, taking pride in his collection of royal items and being courteous towards Roddy once he learns that he's from the surface.
Up top.
But it doesn't take much for the Toad to show off some of his inner rage and willingness to be shady, whether that's through theft or through freezing people who get in his way.
Thieves, double-crossers, and do-gooders.
After Roddy and Rita inadvertently put his upcoming plans at risk, however, we get to learn just how evil the Toad truly is. Using both the sewers and a big soccer game to his advantage, the Toad's grand plan was to completely wipe out all the innocent rats that live there by opening the gate and flooding everything before then repopulating the underground city with his own tadpoles.
Repopulate the city!
So, yeah, rat genocide. Not exactly an easy crime to overlook, even if he wasn't able to get away with it in the end. What's more, the Toad still froze and likely killed quite a few rats, not to mention all his other thefts and attempted crimes. Overall, the Toad is driven by hatred and rage, and the only real good side he has is that he seems to be a somewhat loving father, even if his tadpoles sometimes annoy him. Finally, our Gold Medal of Evil goes to the one and only Mrs. Tweety. Yeah, we know, predictable choice and all that, but honestly, there's a reason why she's the only villain Aardman ever brought back for a second round.
Welcome to the future.
And then while Vicky and Toad were definitely close, we really couldn't give anyone else this top spot. Mrs. Tweety is calculating and cruel with 2 capital C's, willing to do whatever and use whomever she needs to in order to get rich. While we do see her care quite a bit about revenge against Chickenkind in the sequel,
Revenge?
Revenue. That's what I meant.
money and status remain her prime motivation, easily making her Aardman's greediest character and earning her our Greed Medal. It could be argued that at least the Toad cared about his family. Mrs. Tweety, on the other hand, as evidenced by how she treats her 2 husbands, truly doesn't care about anyone but herself. Heck, likely the only reason she agreed to Fry's mind control collars was to help assure that there wouldn't be another chicken escape attempt at her new factory farm. And once this plan falls through, she seems to take a disturbing amount of delight out of grabbing her trusty axe and trying to take out the rebellious chickens herself, refusing to let them escape with their lives. She even threatens to cut off Molly's head as a means to intimidate Ginger into surrendering. While some may question her business methods in terms of pure evilness and just overall being a true monster at times, Mrs. Tweety just can't be beat.